Good day, folks. Hope you are having a good one. Really hope you're having a good week. We are going to get into some Games Workshop stories here today. But firstly, this will get a little bit dark, a little bit on the depressing side. Not too bad, I hope. But at the end of the day, I honestly wish that, you know, this didn't happen and that I could have you more interesting and happy stories for you. But it's also very, very good to discuss these things and make sure that all of you know what the pitfalls are to working with things that you love, because sometimes it doesn't always work out for the best. That was my door, by the way, not my bottom. Firstly, I want to thank a few people. Michael A. McBroom, you're a legend, my friend. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Berger Hanning, Jacob Ekman, Marcus Mahab, James Johnson. James, you are on the $25 Astral Backer plan on the Patreon, by the way, so please get in contact if you want to have a little chat. And Vibratech and Converted Iron. Those are the guys I want to thank today. You guys are all amazing, and you are on the top patron list because you generally help me out, and I couldn't do this without you. I literally wouldn't be here doing this video today without you guys, so thank you very much. That is not to say anything else for all the other patrons, because you're all awesome, and I will be reading your names out in coming videos too, but those guys have been with me the longest. They deserved a good old pat on the back. So, let me get into my own hobby experience, and my own hobby experience today is talking about me leaving Games Workshop. It's not a story that I like to go over too often, and it brings up some painful memories for me. It's not something that I want to do all of the time, but sometimes it's good to look back and recognise where you come from and things like that. These are kind of things where, in previous stories, I've spoken about my time leaving Games Workshop and things like that, but I've not really gone into details, so I've given you snippets here, there, and everywhere, basically. So you could probably, like, figure out what's going to be in this. If you watched all my content, you probably know the story, but you know it in, like, different bits here and there. Kind of like a Star Wars film series, you know what I mean? Like, Episode 4 is the one that you start with and things like that. So I wanted to do it verbatim today and do it in chronological order. Not extensive, but I'm using my own experience and experience of other people's losing faith in their hobby with Games Workshop in the first 3 bits anyway, but my own experience. Well, number one, I've numbered these in 3 ways before I get into the actual story. Number one, this is losing your faith in the hobby, alright? Losing your faith in doing your models, losing your faith in the lore, and even wanting to hear about Games Workshop or anything that they're doing. Because for a year or 2 after I left, I was not into Games Workshop at all. When this channel started, I did a video called Games Workshop My Experience. That did incredibly well, did like 80,000 views to 100,000 views. I didn't have monetization back then, god damn it, but, you know, whatever. And I left it, that was it, I was done. And I threw out all of my bile and vitriol, and I was done. And I did gaming videos, and I did writing videos that got no views, and I was happy to do them, but it wasn't something that I did every single day, and I had long forms of content where I would not do anything at all because I didn't have the energy for it, right? Whereas this stuff I like doing. I like talking about Warhammer because it's one of the main things that's been in my life for years. But working with the same thing day by day has you dreading the hobby if you're working in it. You head home at the end of the day, and even if you want to paint some models or write some lore, you simply cannot work up the energy, especially if you want to but cannot justify it. I mean, how can you justify working at Games Workshop all day, then coming home to your family and friends and doing yet more hobby? It's just not something that can be done, right? This only gets worse if your time at Games Workshop is not going well. If your sales are going down, thanks to a local store selling your stock at 25% off, and your days are filled with the dregs who come in and generally take up all of your time and put nothing into the till, into the store register, try coming home and working up on the passion for a hobby that you used to have. Now imagine this company you worshipped as a kid treats you rather badly. You get snooty emails on a daily basis, are queried about every single selling trend in your store, you are given thinly veiled threats of the sack from your job in each and every exchange with headquarters, if they even bother contacting you at all. Even when some legend from HQ actually wants to help and does their best, they know they are working against the tide, and you are eventually going to get pushed off the edge. After this, go home and work on your new Eldar force. Yeah, I didn't think you wanted to, right? It's just impossible. And this is the sentiment that I get from a lot of ex-Games Workshop managers as well. The one thing that they love, the fact that they don't work at Games Workshop anymore, is the fact that they can actually do the hobby. And most of them can afford to do the hobby now because they're in better paid jobs. Even with that 50% discount on most Games Workshop stock, you can very rarely afford to do the hobby that you work to sell to other people. I have a few anecdotes to share, but one that really stands out is towards the end of my time at Games Workshop. At this stage, I had seen my store crumble from being relatively successful to the point that my trainer would bring me up as one of his success stories to colleagues to being a total pariah in the company. You know, I'd gone from being, hey, look at this guy, look how well he's doing, look how well I trained him, to, oh my god, I didn't even talk about that guy, he's in that store that isn't doing very well, right? That was it. A trade account, what we call any hobby store, our stock that sells our stock that is not a Games Workshop store, so any friendly local game store essentially. One of those trade accounts opened up nearby to my store, selling my expensive models at 25% off, as I mentioned earlier. So they're selling the same stuff I do, but 25% cheaper than what I am able to do. I can't run any sort of deals at Games Workshop because that's not allowed. As such, parents were very happy to have their kids playing at my store with the nice Games Workshop man away from the neckbeards in the other stores, but they would give their money to the neckbeards as it was so much cheaper. And honestly, I could hardly blame them, right? I can hardly blame them for making that choice. I brought this up at one training weekend and was met with a silent room. So I literally sat there and around this table in Leeds. Don't know why we were in Leeds, but you know, there you go. And I literally said, look, you know, they were saying, what are the problems at your store? And I said, well, one problem at my store is that somebody else just down the road, 300 yards away, is selling my stock at 25% off. There's nothing I can do about that. That is completely out of my control, and it's harming my business. Right? I was met with my head of retail shaking his head at me like I'd come into the room and taken a big dump on the table and right in front of him. That was the reception that I got to that concern that I brought up. I think that was likely a moment where my card was marked as for removal from the cult of Games Workshop retail at that point, you know. One of many moments, really. And so, I had seen the store crumble financially, slowly at first, but then more and more, like a snowball going downhill. I only broke even by throwing myself into the store in frankly unhealthy ways. I hardly slept. I constantly thought about the store profits and how to maximise them. I designed entire campaigns and tournaments from scratch to get people in the door just so I could have them there and I could try and sell them some models. Only to be met with an understandable rebuttal when they mentioned that they or their parents only shopped at the cheaper stores. Fair enough. My social life ebbed away to nothing. I hardly spoke to my family back home in Liverpool. The store became my life, and my life became the store, and even then, I only broke even. Barely. Barely. You do all this and you tell me whether your passion for the hobby would have gone, because this is one of the main pitfalls of working for Games Workshop, in my opinion. One day, towards the end of that cycle, a man from HQ came to the store who I will not name, but he is a legend and he knows who he is. He watches my videos. Thank you very much for doing this for me. He came from HQ to the store for a surprise visit, as they often did. As HQ had given out a new stock showcase list. Essentially, what this was, you would get an email telling you where things should be in the store, stock-wise, right? So you move the Age of Sigmar from over there to over here, sort of a thing. And wouldn't you know it, the entire store needed completely restructuring on my day off. This guy knew the stress I was under and came in to help on his own time. We changed the store around in 4 to 5 hours, and on one of my work days, you know, so he made sure I did it on a work day and didn't have to do it on my day off, and sat down after a decent day of sales. So we sat down at the hobby table, at the painting table. He asked me how I was doing as we sat at the painting table, having a cup of tea, and I said, oh, the store's doing fine, the store is doing just fine, it's chugging along, but nothing out the ordinary, you know? He said, oh, no, I asked how you were doing, dude. The conversation kind of went along like that, really. When he asked me if I do any hobby at home, I told him I had not painted a model in 8 months. He took me for a pint and was obviously alarmed by my response. There, I broke down really, not in crying, but I told him I wasn't sleeping. I showed him all the work I put into crusades and tournaments, campaigns, advertising in town by myself. I literally walked around my local town with a cutout of a Space Marine and just spoke to people about the hobby, gave them a free blister of a Space Marine, and told them to come at the store and paint it if they were up for it. And I was able to get people in the door doing that. I was able to get young people in the door doing that, just walking around town. And I did all of this to hardly break even in the store, thanks to the constant undercutting of the local competition. This is not something he could fix, but he did advise me that there are better things out there for someone with this kind of drive than working at Games Workshop. Maybe, as he said, maybe you've hit your ceiling. Either apply for something else in the company so they can use you, or do something else. That's my advice. Yeah, that was an advice from somebody working at HQ. Either apply for something at HQ so we can use you, or do something else. Sometimes you need some tough love to make some hard decisions in life, and he was right. The last month or two at Games Workshop after this were kind of a dark period for me. I gave up. I just did what other managers did, and I treated my job as a 9-to-5 job and nothing more. And the store absolutely tanked, as it was no longer held up by sheer willpower and duct tape. I had dictated to a few people at HQ that if another job offer was not on the way elsewhere in the company, I'd probably leave as my contract was coming up. I applied for other things at head office, and was invited for an interview at HQ, which I was very excited for, only to find out I was being interviewed for my own store. As my contract was up, and I said I was not sure about staying, they had advertised it to others, which is fair. It does show the lack of communication though. Anyway, in this interview I had told them that I was not really interested in taking on the store anymore, and gave them my reasons, was completely honest. They were appalled that I had run campaigns and tournaments in the store, which is a big no-no, and we were polite to each other, but it was obvious that the marriage was over. It was obvious. They weren't happy with me being in the store if I was running tournaments and doing all these other things to try and maximize profits, and I wasn't happy with them and the micromanaging of my store that I was supposed to have on my own, right? Whilst another job at HQ was not forthcoming, because, lo and behold, I told people like the head of retail, hey, my store isn't doing well, and I think this is one of the reasons why, you know? Lo and behold, once again, whilst back in Liverpool, I got a phone call from GWHQ wishing me the best, but they gave the store to someone else. Again, I've already told them I wasn't interested in the store, I wanted to do other things. I thanked them for the opportunity and asked them to pass on my best wishes and commiserations to the guy replacing me at the store. And I worded it just like that. I went home and had a cup of tea at my mum's house, not really sure what to do before heading back to where I was living in England. 2018 was a bit of a shocker of a year for me. I hated it. Thank the stars, 2019 was a fantastic one. But that's a story for another time. So that's the tale of how I ended my time at Games Workshop. It wasn't great, and it felt like shit, and I never want to go through something like that ever again. They say never meet your heroes, but to have your heroes actively, you know, destroy your mental health was something else entirely. It was something that I literally couldn't fathom. And I walked away from the hobby for around 2.5 years. It was only in 2019, towards the end of 2019 as well, when I finally started to get into Warhammer 40k again. I started to buy some more models, I started to do my own thing, I started to actually become interested in the hobby again. And it was only because I was in a new relationship, I was in a new job, a new career, and I was being trained towards that new career and I was enjoying it, that I was now on a more stable footing to go and do some hobby stuff. And even then, the first few months were really hard for me. Like, I had to work up the courage to do Games Workshop models. I had to work up the courage to actually go out and do the hobby. And eventually, do you know what helped me out? Doing videos on this channel where I started talking about the hobby, and those videos did so much better than every other video that I'd done, but I still didn't do them that much because I just wasn't into the hobby that much. But you guys pulled me through. You really did. You pulled me into doing the hobby and making sure that it was something I did. When I was in America and things started to go badly again, the great thing was the hobby was there for me. I was able to go and do the hobby and take my mind off of things. And so I was kind of given back from the hobby. The hobby had destroyed me in certain ways. But recently, especially with the channel and how things are going, it's given back to me a lot more. To the point where I think this year, I can look back at the hobby and my time in it, and I can carry on with my hobby time as a net positive rather than a net negative, which is a huge thing for me. And I can only thank you guys for helping me out on that journey. Thank you very much for watching. That was my hobby story for today. I know it wasn't like an in-depth Games Workshop story or a comedy one. It was a bit of a darker one. But hey, people asked me to discuss it, and I've discussed it. Tomorrow we will do more Hobby Nightmares. Thursday, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I might do a stream. I might do a podcast. I'm not sure. And on Friday, we'll be doing more Hobby Nightmares, but I may do one of my own stories, because I have a really funny one coming up that I think you will enjoy. So, love you all a long time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will speak to you soon. Have a good one. See ya.